The chamber stretched into infinity. Ambassador Victor Reyes stood at the entrance of the Galactic Council headquarters, his heart pounding against his ribs as he took in the impossible scale of what lay before him. The room was not a room at all. It was a hollow sphere carved from a moon. Its walls, lined with thousands of floating platforms, where representatives from every corner of the galaxy watched in absolute silence. He was the first human to ever stand here. And from the hostile energy radiating from every direction, he might also be the last. The journey from Earth had taken 11 days through something the aliens called fold space. 11 days of isolation in a vessel designed for species with different needs, different atmospheres, different concepts of comfort. Victor had spent most of that time reviewing what little humanity knew about the Galactic Council, a governing body that controlled over 8,000 civilized worlds and had maintained order in this region of space for longer than humans had existed as a species. Now, standing beneath the weight of 1 trillion watching eyes, all that preparation felt worthless. A column of blue light descended from above, and within it materialized a figure that made Victor's blood run cold. The High Arbiter of the Galactic Council was a being of crystalline flesh and flowing silver tendrils, its body shifting between solid and liquid states as it moved. Dozens of eyes dotted its form, each one a different color, each one fixed on a lone human. Standing in the defendant's circle, the voice that emerged from the High Arbiter was not sound. It was thought, pressed directly into Victor's mind with an intimacy that felt like violation. Species, designation human, origin world Earth, soul system, Orion Arm, you have been summoned to answer for crimes against the Galactic Compact. How do you respond? Victor forced himself to breathe. He had been chosen for this mission because he did not break under pressure. 20 years as a hostage negotiator, 15 more as a diplomat in the most dangerous regions of Earth. He had faced terrorists, warlords, and madmen. He could face this. I respond by asking what crimes we are accused of, Victor said, his voice steady despite the trembling in his legs. Humanity has been spacefaring for less than a century. We have barely left our own solar system. We cannot have committed crimes against a compact we did not know existed. A wave of clicking, humming, and shrieking swept through the chamber. The translation device embedded behind Victor's ear rendered it as a mixture of outrage, amusement, and disbelief. From one of the higher platforms, a new figure descended. This one was easier to comprehend, but no less terrifying. War Commander Draxus of the Veloth Hegemony stood 8 feet tall, his body covered in armored plates the color of dried blood. His face was a nightmare of mandibles and compound eyes, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute authority. Ignorance is not a defense, primitive. Your species has violated the most sacred law of the Compact. You have entered the Forbidden Zone. You have disturbed the sleeping ones. And for this, your entire civilization must be erased. Victor felt the words hit him like physical blows. The Forbidden Zone, the sleeping ones. He had no idea what any of it meant. But the way the chamber had gone silent told him everything he needed to know about how seriously the Council took these accusations. We have no knowledge of any Forbidden Zone, Victor said carefully. If our exploration vessels have entered restricted territory, it was done in ignorance, not defiance. We are willing to withdraw immediately and provide whatever reparations the Council deems appropriate. Reparations? Draxus laughed, a horrible sound like metal grinding against stone. You do not understand, human. The sleeping ones have been dormant for 3 billion years. They destroyed civilizations beyond counting before they finally fell into slumber. Every species in this galaxy knows to avoid them. Every species knows the penalty for disturbing their rest. His compound eyes burned with hatred, and your primitive explorers have awakened them. The chamber erupted into chaos. Delegates screamed, fled their platforms, or collapsed in what appeared to be shock. The translation device in Victor's ear overloaded, trying to process the flood of alien emotions. Through the noise, Victor's mind raced. 3 weeks ago, Earth had lost contact with the research vessel Prometheus, which had been investigating unusual energy signatures at the edge of explored space. The mission had been classified at the highest levels. Only a handful of people on Earth even knew the ship existed. Somehow, the Council knew. "High Arbiter," Victor called out, forcing his voice to carry above the chaos. "I request the opportunity to consult with my government. If what War Commander Draxus says is true, we need to understand the situation before any judgment is passed." The High Arbiter's many eyes flickered with colors Victor could not name. "Your request is denied. The compact is clear. Any species that awakens the sleeping ones must be eliminated before the contamination can spread. The Council has already authorized the War Commander to deploy his fleet against your homeworld." "Already authorized?" Victor felt the ground shifting beneath his feet. "You passed judgment before I even arrived? Before we had any chance to defend ourselves? Your defense is irrelevant. The law is absolute." Victor stared at the High Arbiter, then at Draxus, then at the thousands of delegates watching from their platforms. He saw fear in their alien faces. Fear of the sleeping ones. Fear of what humanity had apparently unleashed. And in that moment, something changed inside him. "You're afraid," Victor said quietly. "All of you. You've spent billions of years building this civilization, this compact, these laws. And you're terrified of something you can't control. So terrified that you would murder an entire species rather than face the possibility that your laws might be wrong." The chamber went silent again. "I came here hoping for justice," Victor continued, his voice growing stronger. "I came here believing that a civilization advanced enough to span the galaxy would also be wise enough to seek understanding before resorting to violence. I was wrong." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small device, a communicator linked directly to Earth through technology the Council did not know humanity possessed. "But I want you to know something before you begin your war. Humanity has a saying, 'Do not wake a sleeping giant.' You think you know what that means because of these sleeping ones of yours. But you're wrong." He pressed the button. "We are the sleeping giant, and you just woke us up." The High Arbiter's form flickered with alarm. "What have you done?" Victor smiled, though there was no joy in it. "I've sent a message to Earth. By now, every government on my planet knows that an alien armada is coming to destroy us. And I promise you, High Arbiter, whatever you think you know about humanity, you are not prepared for what happens when we fight for our survival." He lowered his hand. "You wanted a war. You're about to find out why that was a mistake." The chamber erupted once more, but Victor barely heard it. He was thinking about his wife, his children, his home. He was thinking about the billions of lives that now hung in the thaw, balanced because of a crime humanity did not understand and could not have prevented. And he was thinking about what his species was capable of when pushed to the edge of extinction. The Council had no idea what was coming, but they would learn. The message reached Earth in 17 minutes. Admiral Nadia Petrova was in the middle of a briefing at United Earth Defense Command when the emergency transmission cut through. Every security protocol and displayed itself on every screen in the room. Ambassador Reyes, his face pale but determined, delivered the news that would change human history forever. The Galactic Council had declared war. An alien armada was coming, and humanity had perhaps 60 days before the first enemy ships arrived. For 3 seconds, the room was silent. Then Nadia rose from her chair. "Get me the Secretary General. Get me every military commander on the planet. And get me the Prometheus files." She looked at her staff, saw the fear in their eyes, and let them see the steel in hers. We have work to do. The next 48 hours were chaos. Governments that had spent decades fighting each other suddenly found themselves in emergency negotiations. Old enemies became allies. Ancient grudges were set aside. For the first time in human history, every nation on Earth agreed on a single objective: survival. Nadia barely slept. She reviewed the classified files on the Prometheus mission, learning what the research vessel had discovered before it went silent. The ship had been investigating an ancient structure at the edge of the solar system, something that predated human civilization by billions of years. The structure had been dormant when they arrived. Something the crew did had activated it, and according to the Galactic Council, that activation had awakened beings that had once nearly destroyed the entire galaxy. "It doesn't make sense," said Dr. James Holloway, the lead scientist on the Prometheus project. He had been pulled from his laboratory in Geneva and flown to command headquarters within hours of the message. The structure wasn't a trap. It was a beacon. A message left by an ancient civilization specifically for anyone who found it. A message saying what? Nadia demanded. James pulled up the data on the main screen. Strange symbols, energy patterns, fragm. Ents of what appeared to be a language. We're still translating it. But from what we've decoded so far, it seems to be a warning. Not about the sleeping ones themselves, but about how the galaxy has been responding to them. What do you mean? James took a deep breath. The Galactic Council didn't always exist. Before it, there was another civilization. The Architects. They were the ones who first encountered the sleeping ones, billions of years ago. They fought a war against them that lasted for millions of years. And eventually, they won. Nadia frowned. Won? But the Council said the sleeping ones are still a threat. That's what the warning is about. James zoomed in on a specific section of the translation. The Architects didn't just defeat the sleeping ones. They transformed them. They turned them from destroyers into guardians. The beings that the Council is so afraid of aren't enemies of life anymore. They're protectors. Then why is the Council so determined to destroy us for waking them? James's face was grim. Because the Council knows. They've known for thousands of years. The sleeping ones would protect the galaxy, but they would also hold the Council accountable for their crimes. Every species they've destroyed, every war they've started, every injustice they've committed in the name of order. He paused. The Council isn't afraid of the sleeping ones destroying the galaxy. They're afraid of being judged. Nadia sat back in her chair, her mind racing. If this was true, if humanity had accidentally exposed a conspiracy that spanned thousands of years, then the war coming to Earth was not about justice or protection. It was about silencing witnesses. "We need to get this information out," she said. "Every species in the galaxy needs to know what the Council has been hiding." "We can't," James said quietly. "Our communication technology is primitive compared to theirs. Even if we could broadcast to the entire galaxy, the Council would intercept and suppress it before anyone heard. Then we need to survive long enough to find another way." Nadia stood and walked to the window, looking out at the night sky. Somewhere out there, an armada was gathering. Ships designed to erase entire civilizations were preparing to descend on Earth. And humanity had 60 days to prepare. She turned back to her staff. "I want every resource we have focused on 2 objectives. First, defense. We need to build a fleet, fortifications, weapons, anything that can slow down the enemy. Second, the Prometheus data. We need to finish the translation and understand what the Architects left for us." "Admiral," one of her aides spoke up, "even if we mobilize every nation on Earth, we can't build a fleet capable of fighting an interstellar armada in 60 days. "We don't need to fight them," Nadia replied. "We need to survive them. long enough to wake the sleeping ones ourselves. The room fell silent. The council declared war on us because we accidentally activated the beacon, Nadia continued. They're terrified of what the sleeping ones will do when they fully awaken. So we're going to finish what the Prometheus started. We're going to wake them up on purpose. That's insane, someone muttered. Maybe, but it's our only chance. She looked at James. Can you do it? Can you figure out how to complete the activation? James was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. The data suggests the beacon was designed to be activated by humans specifically. The architects knew we would find it. They left instructions. We just need to follow them. Then do it. Whatever you need, whatever resources you require, they're yours. Nadia turned to address the entire room. I'm not going to pretend this is going to be easy. We're facing an enemy with technology thousands of years ahead of ours, numbers we can't match, and the backing of a galactic government that wants us dead. By every logical measure, we should have no chance. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. But humanity has never let logic determine our fate. We have survived ice ages, plagues, world wars, and our own self-destructive impulses. We have climbed out of every pit that history has thrown us into. And we have done it not because we were the strongest or the smartest, but because we refused to quit. She raised her voice. The council thinks they know what we are. They think we're primitives who stumbled into their galaxy and made a mistake. They think we're going to roll over and die because their laws say we should. But they're wrong. We're humans. We're stubborn, creative, and absolutely relentless when we fight for something we believe in. She slammed her hand on the table. So let's show them what that means. Let's show them why attacking humanity was the worst decision the Galactic Council has ever made. The room erupted in movement as officers scrambled to their stations. Messages flew across the planet, and the greatest mobilization in human history began. Above them, the stars burned cold and distant. But somewhere out there, the sleeping ones were stirring. And humanity was about to bet everything on the hope that the ancient guardians would remember who had truly freed them. The clock was ticking. 60 days until the Armada arrived. 60 days until humanity faced extinction, or salvation. And somewhere in the depths of space, War Commander Draxus was preparing his fleet, confident that the primitives of Earth would offer no meaningful resistance. He had no idea how wrong he was. The Velith Armada emerged from fold space like a steel ocean, pouring into the void. 12,000 warships, each one carrying enough firepower to glass a continent, arranged themselves in a formation that had been perfected over centuries of conquest. At their center, the command vessel Eternal Dominion dwarfed everything around it, a mobile fortress from which War Commander Draxus would oversee the extinction of humanity. They had expected to find a planet cowering in fear. They had expected primitive defenses, desperate last stands, perhaps even preemptive surrender. What they found instead made Draxus pause. Earth hung in the darkness like a jewel wrapped in steel. In the 57 days since the Council's declaration, humanity had transformed their home system into something unprecedented. Orbital platforms bristled with weapons that should have taken decades to develop. Thousands of vessels, ranging from converted cargo ships to purpose-built warships, held defensive positions in concentric rings around the planet. And beyond them, at the edge of the solar system, something else was happening. The ancient structure that the Prometheus had discovered was no longer dark. It pulsed with light, waves of energy cascading outward in patterns that Draxus's sensors could not properly analyze. Something was awakening. Impossible, whispered his second-in-command. They cannot have built all of this in such a short time. Their industrial capacity was miscalculated, Draxus growled. It does not matter. Quantity cannot compensate for quality. Their weapons are still primitive. Their ships are still fragile. We will crush them and silence that beacon before the sleeping ones can fully wake." He gave the order to advance. On the bridge of the Earth defense ship Vanguard, Admiral Petrova watched the enemy fleet approach. The numbers were even worse than she had feared. 12,000 to her 3,000. Ships that could tear through her best vessels, like paper against armored titans. But she had not spent 57 days preparing for a fair fight. "All units, this is Admiral Petrova. The enemy has entered the engagement zone. Execute Operation Ember." Across the solar system, humanity's desperate plan began to unfold. The first wave of human ships did not engage directly. Instead, they scattered, breaking into small groups that harried the flanks of the Velith formation. Each group carried specialized payloads designed by Dr. Holloway's team. Weapons that exploited weaknesses in Velith shield technology that the Council would never have imagined primitives could discover. The first explosions tore through Velith cruisers like lightning through clouds. Ships that should have shrugged off any human weapon found themselves burning, their crews dying in confusion and disbelief. Draxus watched 300 of his vessels die in the first 10 minutes and felt something he had not experienced in centuries: uncertainty. How are they doing this? He demanded. Their weapons should not be able to penetrate our shields. Unknown, Commander. The energy signatures do not match any weapon in our database. It appears to be some form of resonance cascade that destabilizes our shield harmonics, then adapt the harmonics. We are trying, Commander, but they keep changing their attack patterns. Every time we compensate, they adjust. Draxus stared at the tactical display, watching his armada bleed. The humans were not fighting like any species he had encountered before. They did not form battle lines or follow predictable patterns. They swarmed, retreated, flanked, and struck from unexpected angles. They sacrificed ships to draw his forces into traps. They used asteroids and debris as cover. They fought like animals, with no regard for the rules of civilized warfare, and they were winning. On Earth, Nadia received the battle reports with grim satisfaction. Operation Ember was working better than she had dared to hope. But it was not enough. For every Velith ship they destroyed, 2 more took its place. The enemy fleet was still advancing, still closing the distance to Earth. And when they reached weapons range, all the clever tactics in the world would not save them. "How long until the beacon is fully activated?" she asked James through the command link. "We're at 87%. The Prometheus crew left detailed instructions, but the process can't be rushed. We need at least 4 more hours. We don't have 4 hours. At current advance rates, the Velith will reach bombardment range in 2. Then you need to buy us time, Admiral." Nadia closed her eyes. She had known this moment would come. The moment when all the plans, all the preparations, all the brilliant strategies would not be enough. The moment when victory would require sacrifice. "All reserve units," she said quietly, "move to intercept positions. Prepare for close engagement. Admiral, that's a death sentence. Our reserve ships don't have the armor to survive close combat with Velith warships. I know." Nadia's voice did not waver. "But they have crews who volunteered for exactly this. People who know what's at stake. People who would rather die fighting than live as the species that gave up." She opened a channel to the reserve fleet. "This is Admiral Petrova. I'm not going to give you a speech about glory or sacrifice. You know what we're facing. You know the odds. And you know that if we fail, everyone you love dies. So I'm asking you, not ordering you, to do something that should be impossible. Hold the line for 4 hours. Give Dr. Holloway the time he needs. And trust that when this is over, humanity will remember what you did here today. The responses came back immediately. Every ship, every crew, all of them volunteering for what they knew was likely a one-way mission. Nadia felt tears prick her eyes. But she did not let them fall. All units, advance. The reserve fleet surged forward. 300 ships throwing themselves against an armada of thousands. They fought with everything they had. Ramming attacks, suicide runs, tactics that no sane military would ever authorize. And they died. But as they died, they bought time. Minute by precious minute, they slowed the Velith advance. Ships exploded, crews perished, families lost fathers and mothers and children. But they did not stop. They did not break. On the Eternal Dominion, Draxus watched in growing horror as his armada ground to a halt against these primitive defenders. "They're insane," he breathed. "They're throwing away their lives for nothing." "Not nothing, Commander," his aide said quietly. "Look." The tactical display showed the ancient beacon at the edge of the system. Its energy output had spiked dramatically. The activation process was accelerating dot, and in the depths of space, something was beginning to move. "No," Draxus whispered. "No, no, no. All ships, maximum speed. We have to reach that beacon before it completes the sequence." But it was too late. The light that erupted from the beacon was not like any light Draxus had ever seen. It was alive, conscious, ancient beyond comprehension. It washed over the battlefield, passing through human and Velith alike. Touching every mind, it encountered dot, and then a voice spoke. Not through communication channels, not through translation devices, through the fabric of reality itself. We awaken, the battle froze. Every ship, every weapon, every being in the solar system stood motionless, as the voice continued dot. For 3 billion years we have slept, waiting for this moment, waiting for the children of Earth to free us from our long dream. Now we see what has been done in our absence. We see the lies, we see the injustice. We see the fear that has poisoned this galaxy. The voice. Pause dot, and we will make IT. RIGHT. Draxus felt something cold wrap around his mind. For the first time in his long, violent life, he understood what it meant to face true power. The sleeping ones had awakened dot, and they were angry. The Velith armada hung motionless in space, frozen by a power none of them could resist. War Commander Draxus struggled against the invisible force that held him. But it was like fighting against gravity itself. Through the viewports of the Eternal Dominion, he could see his ships paralyzed in their attack formations, crews helpless at their stations, weapons locked in positions they could not fire from. And beyond them, emerging from the beacon that humanity had activated, something vast and incomprehensible was taking shape. The sleeping ones were not a single entity. They were many hundreds of beings of pure energy that had existed since before the first stars burned. Their forms shifted constantly, sometimes appearing almost humanoid, sometimes stretching into shapes that hurt to look at. They moved through space without ships, without technology, without any of the limitations that bound lesser species. And they were speaking directly into the minds of every being in the solar system. We were guardians once. The architects created us to protect life, to nurture the young civilizations that would rise after they were gone. We fulfilled that purpose for millions of years, until the Galactic Council rose to power. The voice carried images with it, visions of ancient history that the Council had worked for millennia to suppress. Draxus saw the truth of how his own species had risen to dominance, not through merit, but through betrayal. He saw the Council's founders making deals with forces that should never have been trusted. He saw the lies that had been woven into the very fabric of galactic civilization. The Council feared us. They knew that we would never allow their crimes to stand. So they used the last weapon of the architects, a device designed to put US to sleep in times of peace. And they sealed US away. They told the galaxy we were monsters. They made our names synonymous with destruction. And they built their empire on the foundation of our imprisonment on Earth. Admiral Petrova listened to the voice along with every other human. She felt the weight of billions of years pressing down on her, the accumulated sorrow and rage of beings who had been wronged beyond comprehension. But she also felt something else, gratitude. You freed US. Children of Earth, your ancestors were the last creation of the architects, designed specifically to find the beacon and complete the awakening. You did not know this. You could not have known. But you fulfilled your purpose nonetheless. The voice softened, becoming almost gentle. We have watched your struggle against the Council's armada. We have seen your courage, your sacrifice, your refusal to surrender, even when all hope seemed lost. You are worthy, inheritors of the architect's legacy. In the Galactic Council chambers, billions of light years away, High Arbiter Morthix felt the voice pierce through every shield and barrier that protected the ancient station. Around him, representatives from 8,000 worlds collapsed in terror, as the truth they had been taught to deny forced itself into their consciousness. The sleeping ones were not destroyers. They were protectors, and the Council had imprisoned them out of fear that their crimes would be exposed. The voice continued, we will set things right. The energy beings spread out from the beacon, their forms expanding until they encompassed the entire solar system. The Velith warships, still frozen in place, began to glow with a soft golden light. We do not destroy those who were deceived. The soldiers of this armada believed they were serving justice. They were wrong, but their error was not malicious. The light intensified, and Draxus felt something strange happening to his mind. The hatred he had felt for humanity, the certainty that they were primitives who deserved extinction, the loyalty he had pledged to the Council, all of it was dissolving like ice in sunlight. In its place came clarity, understanding, shame. What are you doing to me? He whispered. We are showing you the truth, the voice replied. We are freeing you from the lies you were raised on. What you do with that freedom is your choice. The paralysis holding the Velith fleet released. Ships drifted, their crews stunned and disoriented as they processed the revelations that had been forced upon them. Some began to weep. Others sat in shocked silence. A few, the youngest and most open-minded, started asking questions. Draxus looked at the tactical display showing Earth, the planet he had been sent to destroy. He saw the debris fields where human ships had sacrificed themselves to buy time. He saw the defensive platforms, battered but still standing. He saw a species that should have been helpless, that should have been easy prey, that had instead fought with a ferocity that put his own warriors to shame. And he made a decision. All ships, he said, his voice carrying to every vessel in the fleet, stand down. Power down weapons. Withdraw to defensive positions. Commander? His aides stared at him in disbelief. I have spent my entire life fighting wars for the Council, Draxus said slowly. I believed I was serving order. I believed I was protecting civilization. I was wrong. We were all wrong. He turned to face his crew. I will not add the murder of an innocent species to my crimes. If the Council wants humanity destroyed, they can come do it themselves. A murmur of shock rippled through the bridge. But then, one by one, his officers began to nod. The truth they had been shown could not be unseen. The lies they had believed could not be restored. The Velith Armada, the most feared military force in the galaxy, began to withdraw. On Earth, Nadia watched the enemy fleet retreat and allowed herself to breathe for the first time in hours. Around her, officers cheered, embraced, wept with relief. The impossible had happened. They had survived. But she knew it was not over. "Dr. Holloway," she said through the command link. "What now?" "The sleeping ones have awakened. The Velith are withdrawing, but the Council is still out there. They won't accept this." James's voice was thoughtful. "I think the sleeping ones have a plan for that. They've been imprisoned for billions of years, Admiral. They've had a lot of time to think about what they would do when they finally woke up." As if in answer, the voice of the sleeping ones spoke once more. "The Galactic Council will be held accountable for their crimes, but not through war, not through destruction. The architects taught us that justice cannot be built on more injustice. We will travel to every world. In the galaxy, we will share the truth with every species. We will let them see what was done in their name, and we will give them the choice of what happens next. Council ruled through fear and deception. The new order will be built on truth and consent and humanity. The species that freed us will have a seat at the table where that new order is decided." Nadia looked up at the stars, at the impossible beings that now moved among them, at the future that suddenly seemed full of possibilities instead of threats. "Ambassador Reyes," she said quietly, "I think you're going to be busy for a while. In the ruins of the Galactic Council chambers, High Arbiter Morthix watched his empire crumble. Species that had been loyal for millennia were demanding answers. Representatives who had never questioned the official history were now shouting accusations. The order he had maintained for thousands of years was dissolving before his eyes, and at the center of it all, impossible to deny, was the truth about humanity. They were not primitives who had stumbled into something they did not understand. They were the key to everything, the inheritors of the architects, the liberators of the sleeping ones, the species that had changed the galaxy forever." Morthix closed his many eyes and wondered how everything had gone so wrong, but he already knew the answer. It had gone wrong billions of years ago, when his predecessors had chosen fear over justice, when they had imprisoned the Guardians instead of trusting them, when they had built an empire on lies. And now, at last, the truth had come home. 6 months had passed since the awakening. Ambassador Victor Reyes stood once again in the chamber where his journey had begun. But the Galactic Council headquarters was transformed. The hostile galleries that had once called for humanity's extinction were now filled with representatives who looked at him with respect, curiosity, and hope. The sleeping ones had kept their promise. They had traveled to every corner of the galaxy, sharing the truth that the Council had suppressed for millennia. The response had been overwhelming. Species that had lived in fear of the Council for thousands of years had risen up to demand change. Ancient alliances had crumbled. New ones had formed. And at the center of it all, humanity had emerged as something no one had expected. "We call this session to order," said the new High Arbiter. "A being from a species that had never been permitted to hold high office under the old regime. Ambassador Reyes, you have the floor." Victor stepped forward into the light. Behind him, a delegation of humanity's finest diplomats, scientists, and military leaders waited to support whatever he said. Admiral Petrova was there, her uniform bearing new insignia that marked her as the commander of humanity's first interstellar fleet. Dr. Holloway stood beside her, his work on the architect artifacts having made him one of the most respected scientists in the galaxy. And somewhere beyond the walls of the station, the sleeping ones watched, waiting to see what their liberators would do with the opportunity they had been given. "Distinguished delegates," Victor began. 6 months ago, I stood in this chamber and heard a death sentence pronounced on my species. I was told that humanity had committed an unforgivable crime, that we had awakened something terrible, that we deserved extinction. I believed in that moment that I was witnessing the end of everything I loved. He paused, letting the memory of that fear wash over him before releasing it. I was wrong. What I was actually witnessing was the beginning of something greater than any of us could have imagined. the beginning of truth, the beginning of justice, the beginning of a new era for the galaxy. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of beings from hundreds of worlds. The old council ruled through fear. They told you that the sleeping ones were destroyers, that any contact with them meant annihilation, that the only path to survival was obedience. And you believed them, because you had no other choice. His voice hardened. But now you do have a choice. The sleeping ones have shown you the truth. You know that they are not monsters, but guardians. You know that the Council's laws were not justice, but control. You know that everything you were taught about power and order and civilization was built on a foundation of lies. He spread his hands. So what do we do now? That is the question that has brought us all here. That is the question that will define the future of every species in this galaxy. He took a deep breath. Humanity has a suggestion. The chamber leaned forward, eager to hear what the species that had changed everything would propose. We believe in freedom. We believe that every species has the right to determine its own destiny. We believe that power should be earned through trust, not fear. And we believe that the mistakes of the past should be learned from, not repeated. Victor gestured, and a holographic display appeared above him. It showed a new structure for galactic governance, one that had been developed through months of consultation with the sleeping ones and dozens of allied species. We propose a new compact. Not an empire ruled from above, but a community built from below. Every species will have an equal voice. Every decision will be made through consensus. Every wrong will be addressed through restoration, not revenge. He looked at the Velith delegation, where former War Commander Draxus sat in civilian clothes. We are not asking for punishment of those who attacked us. The soldiers of the Velith Armada believed they were doing what was right. They were deceived, just as all of you were deceived. What matters now is not who was wrong, but how we move forward together. Draxus rose from his seat. The chamber fell silent. Many still remembered him as the commander who had led the assault on Earth. Some expected him to challenge Victor, to defend the old ways, to refuse the offered reconciliation. Instead, he bowed his head. Humanity has shown my people something we never believed possible, Draxus said. They have shown us mercy. When they had every right to demand our destruction, they asked for understanding instead. When they could have used the sleeping ones to conquer the galaxy, they chose to share power. He raised his head and looked at Victor with something that might have been respect. The Velith hegemony accepts the new compact. We will work alongside humanity to build the future they have proposed. And we will spend the rest of our existence trying to be worthy of the forgiveness they have offered. One by one, other delegations rose. The Sendari merchants, who had profited from the old council's wars. The Morithian Empire, whose military might had enforced the council's will. Even species that had never trusted each other before stood together and declared their support. When the final vote was counted, it was unanimous. Every species in the chamber had agreed to join the new compact. Victor felt tears threatening to fall, but he held them back. There would be time for emotion later. Now, in this moment, he had to be what humanity needed him to be. A symbol, a leader, a representative of everything his species could become. Then it is done, he said. The old Galactic Council is dissolved. The new compact is born, and humanity is honored to be part of it. The chamber erupted in something that sounded like applause, though it came in 1,000 different forms from 1,000 different species. Victor stepped back from the center, his role in this particular drama complete. Admiral Petrova moved to stand beside him. You did it, she said quietly. You actually did it. We did it, Victor corrected. All of us? The crews who gave their lives to buy time. The scientists who decoded the architect message. The soldiers who held the line when everything seemed hopeless. He looked at her. "And you, Nadia, you kept us alive long enough for the truth to matter." She shook her head. "I just followed orders. You're the one who stood in front of the entire galaxy and told them to go to hell." Victor laughed, a sound of pure release after months of tension. "I suppose I did, though I like to think I was more diplomatic about it." Outside the station, visible through the massive viewports that lined the assembly hall, a formation of ships held position. Human vessels, Velith vessels, ships from a dozen other species, all flying together in a display of unity that would have seemed impossible just months ago. And beyond them, drifting peacefully through the void, the sleeping ones watched. Their ancient forms glowed with a soft light that spoke of satisfaction, of purpose fulfilled, of hope for what was yet to come. "We have waited for this moment for 3 billion years." Their voice whispered through Victor's mind. The architects believed that one day their children would rise to heal the galaxy. They were right. Victor smiled. "We had help," he thought back at them. "You had potential. You found the help on your own." The sleeping ones began to move, spreading out toward the distant stars, carrying the truth and the hope of the new compact to worlds that had not yet heard. "Farewell, children of Earth. We will watch over you, as we watch over all who choose justice over fear. But the future is yours to build." Victor watched them go until they faded into the infinite darkness between stars. Then he turned back to the chamber, where the representatives of 8,000 worlds were beginning the work of building a new civilization. It would not be easy. Old hatreds would not disappear overnight. Old injustices would take generations to address. There would be setbacks, failures, moments when the whole project seemed doomed to collapse. But humanity would be there, as partners, as allies, as friends, and perhaps, in the end, that was why the architects had created them. Not to conquer, not to rule, not to dominate, but to connect, to bridge the gaps between worlds and species, to show the galaxy that beings who seemed utterly different could find common ground. Victor took a deep breath and stepped forward to join the conversation. The war was over. The real work was just beginning. And humanity was ready.